All right, welcome back, everybody, for part two about Bill Russell, watching Johnny Arnett and his ultimate Bill Russell video. I will be putting the link down to this video in the description below, as usual. But let's not do a long intro here. This is part two. Let's continue learning about Bill Russell because I'm learning a ton about this man.
Wasn't just a legend on the court, but off of it as well, as he was seen as a respected and larger-than-life personality who surely left a lasting impact on the generations after.
Oh man, who here remembers Stuart Scott? Like he was man. That's that old era of ESPN. ESPN was great. Mr. Stewart.
Him. Many content creators have honored Bill with videos that cover the story of his life and legacy. I thought I would honor him by providing information that you may have not heard before. Here's numerous facts about the career of Bill Russell. One of Russell's greatest friends, and throughout his career one of his greatest rivals, was the legendary center Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt and Bill had a legendary rivalry for the ages, as the Giants clashed on a regular basis, as they both attempted to assert their dominance over the league. One of the reasons their rivalry is so legendary is because of how many times these two competitors battled it out. Some of the other greatest rivalries of NBA history would be Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird,
I was just thinking
Michael
the same
Jordan
thing.
versus Isaiah Thomas,
Except for this one did not end in friendship now, did it? It did not go so well. Oh man. 20 select. Okay. Yeah, these guys together.
Shaquille O'Neal versus Kobe Bryant, and Kevin Durant versus Russell Westbrook.
I hope
But
these two
what's
make up
crazy is
someday.
that all of these other great rivalries combined still don't have as many games played against each other as Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain had by themselves, as the two battled it out a total
Really?
of 143 times throughout their careers.
Fuck.
Bill was never known to be an explosive scorer, but he did impact the game in numerous other ways, primarily with his rebounding, defense, and passing. With that being said, in the history of the league, there have only been 9 times where a player has averaged less than 20 points per game and still won the league MVP. Astonishingly, Bill Russell has 5 of those specific MVPs,
Wow.
which is more than the rest of league history altogether. Speaking of Bill's non-offensive impact, many people often consider him as the greatest defensive player to ever live, but unfortunately,
Rundy, we're looking at you, man. I don't see him as a high volume scorer, but I see him as a guy who can like 20 rebounds, 5 blocks, a couple steals, and then still put up like 20 points a game. If he stays healthy. Right now he's skinny as a twig, but if he can stay healthy, get stronger, I'm curious what he can do in 5 years.
many of our modern-day defensive statistics didn't exist during his career. But one of the ones we do have are his defensive win shares. He didn't just dominate this stat, but based on how much he owned it, the stat might as well be named after him. Bill played a total of 13 seasons in
Defensive Player of the Year award should just be called the Bill Russell Award, huh?
the NBA, and incredibly, he led the league in defensive win shares in 11 of those seasons. Second place on the all-time list doesn't even have half as many seasons as Russell did, which was George Mikan and Tim Duncan, who led the league 5 times apiece. Right behind John Havlicek is Paul Pierce for the most points ever scored by a Boston Celtic. Pierce was known as the Truth and could score a ton of buckets in a small amount of time. With his lethal shooting, Pierce made a name for himself in the NBA playoffs with his many high-scoring affairs. With that being said, remarkably, Bill Russell has more games in the playoffs with at least 30 rebounds than Paul Pierce does with at least 30 points.
God damn.
Bill Russell was a winner, we all know this, but he wasn't simply a winner based on his luck and circumstances. The main reason he was so successful is because he was arguably the most clutch basketball player to ever live. Russell played in a total of 10 deciding Game 7s throughout the course of his career, and he never lost a single one of them. He was
That
leaned
stat
upon
is just
heavily in
ridiculous.
those games as he played 488 out of a possible 495 minutes. If Bill isn't dominating without taking almost any rest, then they likely lose some of those Game 7s, as 6 out of those 10 games were decided by only one possession. The reality was that if Russell had an off night in any one of those Game 7s, then he's losing a championship ring because of it. But instead, we now remember him as the legend who has more rings than fingers. Nikola Jokic and Wilt Chamberlain are often recognized as the greatest passing big men of NBA history, which is warranted, but often overlooked in that aspect is Bill Russell, whose court vision and unselfish nature allowed him to be one of the all-time great givers as well. Russell actually has the third highest career assists per game average among centers in NBA history, reaching as high as 5.8 in 1967. Bill had many modern players that he developed a close relationship with.
Kobe, KG loved the hell out of him too.
And he had a high level of respect for many of those players. But there was only one player who Russell referred to as his absolute favorite, and that was the San Antonio Spurs legend, Tim Duncan.
That makes
The
sense.
statement from Bill came from a discussion with Duncan many years ago, and he equated his fondness to their similarities and the fact that Duncan played hard, played smart, and won championships. It makes sense given how similar these superstars were in their approach to the game and their quiet lead by example type style.
Yeah, and Tim Duncan is one of those guys, like, I feel like he's not going to get the respect he deserves. But if you watched him, prime, he was an amazing freaking leader, the best captain you can ask for, because he did whatever it took. If that meant scoring, he scored. If he just had to play defense that day, like Bill Russell, he would do it. He'd get a whole bunch of rebounds. He'd just rack up a whole bunch of stats while winning and leading his team. And you don't even notice it because Tim Duncan was one of the most boring players I've ever seen play. But he was a hell of a winner, man. He got the job done.
As I've already alluded to in this video, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain had a very fierce rivalry, to the point of the two being extremely petty with one another at times. Well, in 1965, Wilt Chamberlain signed a 3-year, $100,000 contract, which at the time made him the highest paid player in the NBA. When Bill Russell caught news of this, he was furious and demanded that the Boston Celtics pay him more than Wilt Chamberlain, otherwise he would consider retiring on the spot. The Celtics obliged and renegotiated Russell's contract and increased his income from $75,000 to $100,001.
Good move. $100,001 just to make a point. Wow.
So that he was now the highest paid player in all of the NBA. These are just some of the amazing facts and details about Bill Russell. What are some of your favorites about him? Let me know in the comment section below. To me, easily the most underrated part of Russell's game was his leaping ability. For some reason, everybody talks about the incredible athleticism of Wilt Chamberlain, yet Bill Russell's jaw-dropping ability becomes somewhat of an afterthought. It's quite insane how
really
two of the most athletically gifted centers in NBA history both conveniently played in the 1960s. Some of you may have not seen the clip where Russell is sprinting on a fast break, and then he jumps clear over the opposing defender on his way to converting the basket. This single play is evidence of his world-class leaping ability. And when I say world-class, I'm not being facetious.
5 dribbles
in 1956,
5 dribbles to get full court? Wow.
Bill Russell participated in the West Coast Relay's high jump competition. In this contest, Bill cleared 6 feet 9.25 inches, which tied him for first place with Charlie Dumas. Russell could have went on to the Olympics that year, but instead, he decided to focus on his basketball career. The man he tied with, Charlie Dumas, went on to win the Olympic gold medal in the high jump competition. Luckily for him, he didn't have the insanely competitive Bill Russell going up against him. At the time, Track and Field News had Russell ranked as the 7th best high.
He wearing one shoe? He's wearing one shoe and then a sock? I want to know what the story is.
Jumper in the world, and as the 2nd best high jumper in the United States. All of that absurd athleticism was packed into a 6-foot 10-inch frame. It's no wonder why he won so much. More often than not, it's offensive players who win the MVP awards and who get all of the attention. But make no mistake, the defensive end of the court deserves more credit, as it's literally half of the game. Today, I'm breaking down my list of the top 10 greatest defensive players in NBA history. And let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with these choices.
This will be a switch
Before I
up.
get into it, let me first explain how my list works. Although defensive accolades are important, they are not the only major factor, as they're given based on the media members voting, which I might not necessarily agree with. The defensive awards also have
Hoping Dennis Rodman gets in here because the stats don't show it. But if you watched him play defense, you'd get it.
a lot to do with who they were up against. So obviously, if the competition was stronger, then it's harder to win the award on a yearly basis. And lastly, this list is a combination of peak defensive abilities and longevity. For example, a player like Mark Eaton was one of the greatest rim protectors in his prime, but he had a relatively shorter career. When you compare his 10 seasons of elite defense to Tim Duncan's 19, well then it's obvious who's making the list and who isn't. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, Michael Jordan.
Fair.
MJ is the only guard to make my list, which really tells you just how difficult it is for a perimeter defender to stand out amongst the crowd.
It is, because those blocks aren't going to be there, but Jordan is the best shooting guard of all time when it comes to blocks, statistically.
MJ deserves the spot though, as he was an absolute menace to opposing guards. He was first team all defense a total of 9 times, which is tied for the most in NBA history. Among guards, he has the highest blocks per game average in NBA history, and he's currently 4th on the all-time list in total steals. Regardless,
Wow. Considering how little he played, like, I mean, how short his career was compared to so many players. I didn't know that. 4th of all time? And shit.
of the fact that he played fewer seasons than most of the players in the top 25. At his best, he won the Defensive Player of the Year in 1988, where he averaged 3.2 steals and 1.6 blocks, which made him first overall in steals per game and first among guards in blocks per game.
And he led the league in scoring, and he won MVP.
Number 9, Ben Wallace.
Not a bad year.
His longevity may have not been enough to get him in the top 5, but his peak was certainly enough to get him in the top 10.
Yeah,
this 6'9" center / power forward was one of the strongest players to ever do it, and he was one of the few men who could actually do a decent job of containing a prime Shaquille O'Neal. His best years were on the suffocating Detroit Pistons of the mid-2000s, and it was during this stretch that he won the Defensive Player of the Year award 4 times in a span of 5 seasons. Regardless of the fact that he was relatively undersized as a center, he was still able to be a solid shot blocker, leading the league overall in the 2002 season. He was also solid at stripping the ball from the opponent, as he averaged 1.3 steals over the course of his career. In total, he made 6 all-defense teams, which is actually the fewest of all eligible players on my list. And as I mentioned before, that was a product of his lack of elite longevity. But when he was at his best, there are very few defenders more intimidating than Wallace. Number 8, Scottie Pippen. Although Michael Jordan may have averaged slightly more steals and more blocks, there was no question that Pippen was the most smothering on-ball defender for their 6 championship runs. Somehow, Scottie never won the Defensive Player of the Year award, which was probably a product of there being so many all-time great defensive centers in his era, but Pippen was the runner-up to Dikembe Mutombo in 1995 and to
Yeah, in the 90s, I'm pretty sure it went to a center basically every single year. Defensive Player of the Year.
Gary Payton in 1996. In the totality of his career, Pippen made 10 all-defense teams, and 8 of those selections were first team, which ties him for the 5th most in NBA history. Within his complete body of work were some key moments where Pippen displayed his abilities, like when he took on the assignment of defending and containing Magic Johnson in the 1991 NBA Finals.
Actually, if you look at the finals footage, like you actually watch those games against the Lakers, Jordan played defense against Magic a whole lot more. But we have these images that are locked into our brains of Scottie locking down Magic. It's a weird thing how it works. And I'm not dissing Scotty at all. He's earned his place at eighth all time um, defender. But this part is not as true as history wants us to believe. But Scotty, hell of a defender, man. Between him and Jordan, I mean, that's why they were able to win so much is they set the tone defensively. And you couldn't just go out there and do what teams do against my sons, which is just go up and go there and light them up. You're going to be defended, and it's not just by Jordan; it's going to be by Pippen as well. So yeah, defense wins championships. Defense added with some good offense. Bill Russell, everything we've learned today, kind of proves that.
Finals. Number 7, Tim Duncan. Just like
Fair.
Pippen, Duncan
Fair.
never won the Defensive Player of the Year award, as he never led the league in steals or blocks.
No, he was a silent assassin on defense. This guy was a nightmare.
And with Bruce Bowen on his team for some years, you could even argue that there were stretches where he wasn't even the best defensive player on his team.
Bruce was a great defender, but also a really freaking dirty defender.
But for what Duncan lacked in peak performance, he made up for it with his insane longevity and consistency. For his career, Duncan earned a whopping total of 15 All-Defense Team selections in his 19 years of pro basketball.
Nice.
That's easily the most selections in NBA history. Many
Wow.
players enjoy being an elite defender in their 20s, but Duncan carried that tremendous impact into his late 30s, as his intelligence and rim protection was a pivotal aspect of their final championship run in 2014. Number 6, Kevin Garnett.
Kevin Garnett,
Especially
yeah.
during his time in Minnesota, the big ticket was a nightmare for opposing teams, as he was always bringing the energy and intensity.
This guy, man, I would have hated to go up against this guy. He was scary. Prime KG, scary, man.
On defense. Like the legendary Hakeem Olajuwon, Garnett was usually among the league leaders in blocks and steals simultaneously. For many years, his elite defense
that
appeared
look.
to go unnoticed, but in his first season as a member of the contending Boston Celtics, he was rewarded with the Defensive Player of the Year. In total, he made 12 All-Defense teams, which is tied for the second most of all time, and 9 of those were first team, which is tied with Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and Gary Payton for the most of all time. Add in the fact that he shut the Lakers down in the paint during the 2008 championship run, and I'm very comfortable having Garnett just outside my top 5.
That's fair.
Number 5, David
Robinson.
Well
Hell
before the
yeah.
big fundamental was locking down the paint for San Antonio, the Admiral was doing it at a higher level.
You know how many games I would see this guy put up like 20 rebounds and 4 blocks? Like David Robinson, time has not remembered him for some reason, but he was phenomenal. He just didn't win a championship until Tim Duncan came around. But yeah, a lot of people forget this guy he was dominant as all hell.
Over a 6-season stretch from 1990 to 1996, Robinson was averaging a monstrous 3.6 blocks per game.
Yeah, there
All-time great.
Wow. Okay, so how I said like I can't tell you how many times I saw him get 4 blocks. That's because he would literally almost averaged it. So every time I would pop up the TV, watch him, he was getting at least 4 blocks. Jesus Christ.
Rim protectors like Tim Duncan and Dwight Howard never had a single season where they averaged that many blocks per game, and Robinson did it over a 6-year stretch. He was also regularly among the league leaders in steals per game, regardless of the fact that he played at the center position, and he got as high as 2.3 steals per game in 1992, which was 5th in the league overall. He was the Defensive Player of the Year in 1992, and he earned a total of 8 All-Defense teams. Due to his service in the US Navy, Robinson didn't debut in his rookie season until the age of 24, and if he had got an earlier start to his career like many players do, then he would likely have even more defensive accolades than he already does.
Yeah, imagine if he came fresh out of high school, like some of these young bucks started 6 years earlier.
Number 4, Wilt Chamberlain.
Interesting.
He's most famous for his accomplishments on offense, but Wilt was arguably just as dominant on the defensive end of the court. Since blocks and steals were not officially tracked until 1973, it's
Goddamn.
basically impossible to accurately estimate his defensive numbers over the entirety of his career. With that being said, Wilt's blocks were unofficially tracked over a 112-game span, and he averaged a mind-blowing 8.8 blocks over that stretch.
Okay.
Obviously, blocked shots are difficult to compare across eras,
Good
considering
Lord.
numerous variables, like how the three-point line didn't exist yet. But
Jump ball.
regardless, that's still insanely impressive no matter how you slice
Yeah, 8.8 blocks a game when he was tracked? What the hell?
it. There are many examples of Wilt controlling games defensively. Some may say that he should be in the number 1 spot,
Ooh.
based on his insane numbers
That's
and
great.
reputation. But I would disagree, as Wilt also had a bit of a reputation for occasionally taking some nights off defensively. Nonetheless, I certainly believe he deserves a spot in the top 5. Number 3, Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman, yes,
The
sir.
Worms' case defensively is a bit more complicated than some people may realize. Statistically, he was nothing to marvel at.
Now he look at this shot. No, man. Stat wise, Dennis Rodman outside of rebounds, he didn't provide much, but he just a straight up menace. And look at him, he's doing a flip in midair.
As he has never had
Oh.
a single season where he averaged at least 1 block or 1 steal. What he did well, though, was frustrate the offensive player with his smothering on-ball defense and force him into either a bad shot or into passing the basketball. I also believe that Rodman had the most versatile defensive career of all time. At different points in history, he was assigned to guard the best player from every position on the court.
Yeah. Even Shaq. He defended every position. Just depended on who was the best player on the opposing team.
In the 80s, he was asked to guard Magic Johnson at point guard, Michael Jordan at shooting guard, and Larry Bird at small forward. And then in the 90s, he was asked to guard Karl Malone at power forward and Shaquille O'Neal at center. And
crazy.
Rodman did more than an adequate job of all of those tasks. In his career, he made a total of 8 All-Defense teams, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year in back-to-back seasons as a member of the Bad Boy Pistons. Number 2, Hakeem Olajuwon.
I was waiting
I've
for
said it
this.
once, I'll say it again. The Dream was an absolute nightmare on defense, as he had the length, athleticism, and intelligence to be one of the select few greatest defenders ever.
Anybody who doesn't have him top 5 centers of all time, you got to watch the Hakeem Olajuwon footage.
Officially, he's the NBA's all-time leader in blocked shots,
Yeah.
and second place isn't even close. On top of that, he's currently 10th on the NBA's all-time list in total steals, which is completely insane for a center. The closest center
Great
to
passer,
Hakeem
great
is David
shooter,
Robinson,
great
who is
rebounder.
54 spots below him on the all-time list. Over his career, Hakeem made 9 all-defense teams, and he won the Defensive Player of the Year twice. It is worth mentioning that he finished in the top 3 of the Defensive Player of the Year voting a whopping 6 times. A couple things that are
Nice.
rarely appreciated about Hakeem was his chase down speed and his lateral quickness, which helped him block and contest many shots from speedy guards and wings. He was truly the standard of defensive excellence in the 1990s. Here is my list of honorable mentions. Feel free to pause the video.
I am going to pause the video. Dwight Howard, yeah. Kareem, Mark Eaton, Fair, Rudy Gobert. Interesting. Nate Thurman, LeBron James. I mean, I'm not really putting him up there, but fine. Dikembe, definitely. I mean, it's hard not to have him in the top 10. Michael Cooper. He was a menace for Larry Bird. Bruce Bowen, very fair. Tony Allen, yeah. Mikan. I can't really comment. Sidney Moncrief. I know these guys are badass, but I can't tell you how good they were on defense. Alonzo Mourning, definitely. Nate Thurman, okay. Gary Payton definitely deserves it. Patrick Ewing deserves it as well. Kobe, for sure. Kawhi, I'm there. Draymond, too. Draymond's another one of those guys who, statistically, it's not going to show up, but you can tell when statistically he's not impacting the game when he's in there, but when he's suspended from Golden State for a week or two, you can see they become one of the worst defensive players in the league. And then he comes back, and then they're immediately one of the best defensive teams in the league. So he's making an impact for damn sure.
Video for a
Good
longer
list.
look. Should any of these players have made it into the top 10? Let me know below. Number 1.
Maybe
Bill
the
Russell. Back when Russell and the Celtics dominated the NBA, the Defensive Player of the Year did not exist yet. So because of this, they often gave him the MVP
All right,
award
we're coming
instead.
back full circle.
Russell was a relentless competitor, and with his Olympian level of athleticism, he established himself as arguably the greatest rim protector in the history of the game. Just like Wilt Chamberlain, who I mentioned earlier, Bill Russell's blocks and steals were never officially tracked, but that doesn't entirely mean that we couldn't gauge his defensive impact. In 11 out of his 13 seasons in the NBA, Russell led the league in defensive win shares. That's more than doubled second place, which is George Mikan and Tim Duncan with 5. The most Defensive Player of the Year awards by one player is a total of 4, which is an honor shared by Ben Wallace and Dikembe Mutombo. If that award had existed during Bill Russell's era, then he likely would have at least doubled that total. Bill Russell built a legacy for himself and won 11 championships with defense as his greatest skill set, in the same era that Wilt Chamberlain played in the NBA. If that isn't a strong case for being the greatest defender of all time, then I don't know what is. So what do you guys think? How does your list differ from mine? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section below.
That was a
Thanks
good
for
list.
watching as always. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Hey, shout out to Mike in the comments for suggesting this video. Uh, didn't expect that the greatest defenders of all time to top it off, but it was kind of cool to bring it full circle that way and show all the other greatest defenders of all time. So I learned a lot from this video. What I want to put into the comments and discuss for this one is one, what did you guys learn about Bill Russell, if anything? And two, who do you have as the greatest defender of all time? Because it's looking like it's Bill Russell. Three, do you think LeBron deserves an honorable mention as one of the greatest defenders of all time? Because that one I don't believe. But let's get some opinions in here. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching this two-parter. I hope you give me a like and subscribe, and also check out Johnny Arnett. This was a really cool video. I'll have the video linked, the link linked in the description below. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.